Recording in
I would like
progress.
to know if it's being monitored, and if it's not, why not? And if it is, will we be made, will the results be made available to us? Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Honorable Phillips. From my part, I need to raise the following issues. Maybe to start with the presentation, my good doctor, can I check that are they here back in the meeting? HOD?
Honorable Chair.
Are they back, your colleagues from Isimangaliso, the Acting Chief Executive Officer and the Accounting Authority?
Yes, they came back when the chair asked for their return. The acting CEO came back.
In the meeting? Are they still in the meeting? Can I check that? Because it's time we're asking questions. Who's going to respond to them?
Honorable Chair,
they came back and let's check. Is Mr. Dulani in the...
Yes, Honorable Chair.
You're back. You're back. Okay. And the Accounting Authority? Mr. Dulani? What happened to the Accounting Authority?
Honorable Chair, I'm still trying to locate Mr. Makakula because he's struggling with his connectivity, but I'm back in the meeting, Chair.
In the future, you must tell the chairperson or the committee secretary when you leave meetings. Definitely you have a contact details. You don't just disappear in a meeting like that if it's not of disrespect of the committee. Starting with the cover of your own presentation as envelope, that's why I was asking whether you're in here. With due respect, I suspect it might be a typing error, Dr. Blackmore. I don't think you've pronounced the committee's name correctly. You called them United Phosphorus Ltd in the cover of your presentation. And then I don't think that's the correct name of the company. The company is UPL South Africa Pty Ltd. That's the correct name, not the United Phosphorus. Can you find the cover? A lot of questions, and then that's all to come back because
Chairperson, we're having difficulty in hearing you.
Meeting. You can't hear me.
Having difficulty in hearing you clearly.
Colleagues, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you, but you can't speak.
Yeah. Am I breaking?
Yes, you were breaking.
Can I check with colleagues? Now. You can hear me. So the issue that I was raising, some of them are of high level in nature. That means the accounting authority. I'm glad that the department led by the HOD is here. Then the absence of the accountability, the matters that I felt they need to be addressed. Yes. And then from you, Dr. as the acting CEO, with regard to the call of diversity generally, okay? And other issue that I know from you is what proportion of the state remedial costs can an organ of the state actually claim from a polluter? And then I also want to understand from yourself as Mvelo whether you do know how long the chemicals remain active in the ecosystem before the system fully recovers, and whether yourself envisages all of this to be taken into account in your cost recovery initiative. And then the other issue that I want to understand from this cost be recovered from the UPL. And then should the company decide to file for bankruptcy, considering all the costs this company faces as a result of the fire incident. And then the other issue that I want to get it from your good self as Mvelo, who do you have in mind should be compensated, and why should such persons compensated? You might send the and the relevant people whom you think they need to be compensated and why. And then the other issue that I want to understand from your good self, what will be considered a proper offsetting in the case of the UPL damage to the broader environment? So those are the questions that I have for you. And then this was what I have also, they cut across to all the presenters now. I would like the national department, the provincial department, the municipality, including the Department of Health to respond to this. And then this is the question that I want to give all of you now. I want every one of you to respond in relation to their line function. Why was this hazardous liquid waste transported all the way through to all containing for considering the risk involved? Couldn't manage all the different categories of the waste that emanated from the UPL incident? I want all of you to respond to that, because as various stakeholders, you've got different roles to play.
Recording in progress.
So to note all of it, the all affected stakeholders, it's on introspection. I want to the issue of this UP incident exposed in us as a Department of Environmental Affairs, SKZ and Provincial Department responsible for this, and eThekwini Metro. Or we are continuing as if it's normal. We are just fine as the National Department of Health. I want you to honestly share with us here, because in your presentation, I don't see it coming clearly. And then on the multi-stakeholder forum, it is stated in particular from the department that a draft terms of reference circulated to stakeholders on the 4th of October to 73 groupings that include individuals, NGOs. Further, launched on the 23rd of October 2021 which was attended by approximately 40 members. And this is stated to be a combination of private citizens and community representatives. Then the issues here are these ones. Can the department clarify to us here whether we are talking about 73 groupings or 73 individuals from 73 formations, as the letter on the department then talks about 40 members is having attended the launch, which is which, and we have been listening to the stakeholders, the affected people. I think we need to get clarity. And then the second issue is how was the draft terms of reference regulated to stakeholders? As some stakeholders might not have access to means of communication that we take for granted, the issue that Honorable Singh has raised earlier, and we've heard them also saying there are issues fighting lack of communication and that they are meeting amongst themselves. Yourself as the responsible government entities, departments, you are not seen anywhere. I'm raising all this issue because we have to be sensitive. It relates to community participation in this kind of a structure. That and we need to understand this disparity so that we can consciously level the playing field for all to engage meaningfully. So DG, I want your comment seriously on that one, because you were all here and I deliberately allowed them to raise the issues first so that we can hear what will be your response, because all your presentation as they are, they never also attempted to respond to the issues that the communities were raising earlier. So, but most of the issues were covered by my colleagues. So these are the kind of feedback we would like to hear from you. We'll follow the same municipality only, then SMVLO, then the provincial department, and then the departments will respond at the end. In that order, Dr. Gumete, you are starting.
Thank you, Chair.
The issue raised by...
Can I start, Chair?
Yes, you can.
Thank you, Chair. I may have missed some of the issues because the connection keeps on breaking. So sometimes I can't hear some of the things said, but I hope I've heard most of what was said. Maybe I should start by indicating what my planning unit has indicated to us when we started trying to understand what permissions were given to this company at the beginning. And we were advised that the land in question at a point in time belonged to Tonga Tulet. Tonga Tulet then sold the land to a company called Forestry, who had an intention to build warehouses. They then met all the permissions required to build warehouses. So the warehouses belonged to a company called Forestry. So Forestry then leased to different stakeholders, and 2/3 of the warehouses were leased to UPL, who then performed this business of storing chemicals in it. So we think that is where there may have been a break, because UPL did not directly come to the municipality, but we were dealing with Forestry at a point in time. So that's one area that is a point that we need to close in terms of our permissions when the use of the warehouses changed from storing non-hazardous, and the company storing hazardous was allowed to lease and not in the municipality not being unaware. I think is a point that we need to deal with. I think that issue addresses some of those issues. In terms of EIA, I will refer to ETIA to actually deal with those issues as it's their competence. The second issue about if the municipality has laid any charge against UPL, we have not laid a charge against UPL. We had a intergovernmental process that we were dealing with, and in our thinking and in our guidance by our legal teams, we were advised that we should support a process that had started by depositing in, our own statements as in support of the process that had been already started. So the different arms of government were depositing based on their mandates, their own statements to support the case that had been opened on behalf of government. So that was the approach we're using to ensure that we, from all our angles, we deposit statements in support of the case. So that is the reason why we have not individually laid charges, but supported and deposited statements in support of the case.
Recording in progress.
Impact long term, which we should follow. It will be part, I think, of the report that we're awaiting. But in terms of immediate, we're looking at respiratory, if there's any respiratory changes, any skin changes, or any eye issues, things that usually prompt you, should there be any of them, of other problems. But our obstetrics clinics would also be monitoring if there are any malformations or any adverse events that are noted during the deliveries of those that are currently pregnant in the area. It would add into this because the clinics in the area are still monitoring as well. In terms of the communication gap, I think my colleagues will talk on it. If how we were dealing with the communities and the stakeholders, and if there is a gap, how we intend closing that gap. In terms of the location of the clinic, as Honorable Gancho asked, the dispersion area and identified the area where the clinic should be in terms of the general area. But because it was far from the certain community, UPL is providing transport. I indicated in the presentation that the specific transport that is provided, and it takes people from points close to where they are to the clinic that has been made available, and the different days when it is available, and then it takes people back as well after they have visited those clinics. The issue of EIA is similar, as Honorable Phillips has spoken about it. I think ETIA may speak on it. And the issue of stillbirths and deformities, I think, of velvet monkeys, I think we will have to check and ask our colleagues to monitor if such is happening, of diseased velvet monkeys, that babies that are there, and see if there is any link with this incident. Honorable Mutambi, I note all the questions. Some I missed because of the bad connection, but I think most were up to Ezemvelo initially. The lessons learned, I think, which the provincial department spoke about for all of us. They relate to all of us. The regulatory gaps also that Health National spoke about also relate to us as well, and those are some of the lessons. And our lessons as well on coastal management. I think we've learned a lot on coastal management, and the decision matrix in those sessions have caused problems as well. And we've had to reverse some of the decisions we've made on those, and we've learned lessons on that, including also, as you say, we all have mandates and regulations that regulate us, and sometimes we think another sphere has done something and we haven't. So the matrix that has been developed will assist us to clarify those roles properly. And you don't expect another sphere to have done something and it is in your area of competence. I think those are some of the issues, the multi-stakeholder issues. I noted all of them, and I hope my colleagues will speak on the members, clarifying 40 members, 73 members of groups, and the issues related to non-attendance of the meetings. My colleagues will speak on. But I'll ask if required by, if given an input by chairperson, the fire chief is here. He can speak on the legislation in our competence that he looks after, that in terms of major hazard installations. There's also environmental health here from the city. They can respond to some of the questions that we raised. Thank you.
Before your license, one of the national departments is it in provincial inspection on the deficiencies that this incident has exposed you to. They will never be the same with that one of the department, nationally and provincial department, and eThekwini. That's why maybe I'll give you time to go back and present that to us in writing. Because I don't think even the other colleagues that are going to respond to, they're not going to deal with these two questions that I've raised. So I'll give you time to present such in writing to us within the next 7 days. These are the issues that you are going to use as the tool as and when we continue to engage with you. The other colleagues from the municipality that want to say something? I've seen the hand of Jeremy Reed. Who's Jeremy Reed? Can I be clarified who's this person who's raising the hand? Who's Jeremy Reed?
I'm switching on my camera. Honorable Chair. I'm the convener of the Multi-Stakeholders Forum, and my hand is up to try and clarify some of the issues that Honourable Singh raised and Honourable Gansho. So, and
okay.
also
Can
I am...
You want it clarified now? Okay, you presented earlier, ne?
I presented earlier, yes, and I'm representing the stakeholders. So, and I have sat here through the whole meeting, so the stakeholders are represented here today, right up until the end.
Oh,
now, I would like the opportunity to respond specifically to what Honourable Singh and
to respond later.
Yeah.
Mr.
Thanks,
Jeremy?
Honourable Chair.
You'll respond later after everybody has responded. I'll give you an opportunity to speak now that you are still here.
Thanks very much.
Can you allow the team to respond? Then I'll give you an opportunity to speak. No?
Yeah, that will be fine.
Okay?
Thank you very much. That will be fine. I'll leave my hand up to remind you.
Yes. So definitely. Thank you so much. The next hand, is it from the municipality? The somebody whose hand is up. DFM. Who's this person? Next one.
Honorable Chair, yes, it's Mkuno.
Part of the stakeholders from the.
It's Mkuno from eThekwini, Honorable Chair.
Okay. You want to respond to some of the issues? Proceed.
Thank you, Chairperson.
What do you do in the municipality? That's where you must tell us. You must start there.
Good evening, Honorable.
You are the head of fire and emergency services.
That is correct, Honorable Chair. Yes. Thank you, Honorable Chair.
My problem, your surname is ending with an E.
Oh, yes. It's Mkuno. It's because it's appearing
and then
as the Enoch. E is for my second name, Enoch.
Oh,
it's registering as my user code on the machine, Honorable Chair.
Oh, I see. Okay, yes. That's what was central to my confusion. Proceed, eh?
Yes, thank you, Honorable Chair. Just to share with the committee on the issue of compliance requirements, specifically on fire protection requirements and major hazard installation regulations for UPL. The situation is such that the UPL had submitted a
Can you
plan.
take your gadget? Can you take your gadget a bit down, or you go up where you are? We can't see you. Just seeing your forehead. There you go. Yes.
Thank you, Honorable Chair.
Okay.
Yes. Insofar as fire protection compliance, the warehouse itself that was occupied by UPL had been approved for fire safety and fire protection systems. For example, we spoke in our presentation of the fire hydrants, sprinkler systems, water tanks of 1 million liters. So those are part of the requirements that they would have met as a general warehouse. However, the non-compliance part came when they submitted their intention to subdivide, as the presentation indicated and Dr. Kumete indicated. They wanted to subdivide the warehouse so that they could deal with flammable liquids on the one part of the warehouse. Now, at the time of this incident happening, we had indicated that we would recommend the subdivision for approval to development planning. However, when this incident happened, they had not submitted their plan that we would recommend for approval for them to store chemicals in the subdivided part of the warehouse. So they did not comply. They did not comply with the requirements for fire, firstly, and then secondly, in terms of the major hazard installation regulations, if they intended to store chemicals, the regulations in the occupational health and safety legislation require that that person intending to do so shall notify the local authority, the chief director at provincial level of their intention, because that then becomes a major hazard installation. And they will therefore also require to get the services of an approved inspection authority to draw up a risk assessment report on their behalf, which will then be submitted to us as the fire and emergency services or as the municipality, where a few departments get together, analyze that risk assessment, and decide on whether to approve the erection of that major hazard installation or the operation of that major hazard installation, or not to approve it with referral notes back to the applicant or to the notifier. That did not happen in the case of UPL. So they operated or stored chemicals without our knowledge immediately after we had indicated we would have supported the subdivision subject to compliance with the fire requirements, including the MHI notification via the risk assessment report to the municipality. So in a nutshell, Chair, that is where the non-compliance with major hazard installations became a reality with UPL. And then the fire started without most of us knowing that they already started storing chemicals in there. Thank you, Chair. I will pause there for now.
Thank you. Is that all from eThekwini? I can move to Velona.
Yes, yes.
Hi, sir. And we have environmental health as well.
Environmental health, yes. Can we allow environmental health?
Good evening, honorable members, compatriots and colleagues. I'm going to respond to a couple of questions by Honorable Temberger, firstly, which asks about the stations not picking up any pollution prior to the fire. So obviously the activities that UPL was conducting did not result in emissions. We only had emissions from them when there was a fire. So prior to that, they wouldn't have picked up anything. Any of our stations wouldn't have picked up anything prior to the fire. That's in terms of Honorable Mtunu's question. And then Honorable Weber, in terms of the first 6 hours, of which was the most intense in terms of the fire, that's when most of the pollutants would have been lifted up. When you have a huge fire, or when the fire is still at its hottest, most of the pollutants would be actually be moved up into the upper atmosphere. What we're concerned with mostly in air quality is ground level concentrations, which is what we actually breathe. So at that time, you would have gotten most of the pollution being elevated high up in the air, not really impacting on nearby communities. So that's mostly what would happen in the first 6 hours of the fire. There would be much more impacts during smoldering, but that would be obviously be accompanied by less pollutants because the fire would be obviously lower than at the fire stage or during when it's burning quite high. In terms of, you asked about lingering pollutants in the air. Well, what happens with pollution is that you would see from industries, they have tall stacks. That is to allow for it to disperse way up in the atmosphere. So you are affected by higher concentration. So when it disperses up in the air, it gets diluted. You would then, if it comes down to ground level, you would breathe in actually much more dilute concentrations, which would not affect you as much as higher concentrations. So pollution lingering way up in the air isn't really a big problem until it comes down to ground, of which then it will be much more diluted. And then in terms of, I think the other one Dr. Gumede responded to in terms of long-term and short-term effects. And then I will respond to the one of just loud hailing. So there wasn't only loud hailing that's done. Whenever we have a fire in the city, we alert residents through media alerts. But in this particular case, due to its nature, we managed to take out pamphlets. There was door-to-door campaigns done. There was also notices that were sent out to community leaders. And we are planning on intensifying community meetings to just ensure that there's nothing we missed in terms of community impacts, especially such as the ones mentioned now about monkeys and neonatal issues. I think that's all.
Thank you, Mr. Molife. Is that all from the city?
Yes, Chair. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Gumede. Ezemvelo?
Thank you, Honorable Chair. Thank you, Honorable Chair. Am I audible?
Yes, you are.
Thank you, Chairperson. Firstly, thank you, Chairperson. Firstly, one must apologize to you, Chair, and the committee it was by no means, something that we were showing disrespect. We just moved out because we were attending other issues, and we're of the view that we will come back when this particular matter is being addressed. We do apologize, Chairperson, for that. Chair, the issue that I will talk to is the issue of the cost recovery. Chairperson, obviously, with the work that is currently being done, I think all the specialist work is actually attended to in terms of payments by the UPL. And at this stage, Chairperson, we really are saying that all the other officials within Esimangaliso are actually doing the work that they would ordinarily do, even if there was no spill, because we are employed by the state. We are raising this, Chairperson, in terms of the issue of cost recovery, because at this stage, there is no clear indication as to when and how long will this particular work take place. And since there is a major impact on the estuary, and we are of the view that it will take longer for it to recover, this is where, Chairperson, we are raising to say that should it happen that down the line there is need for additional resources outside the capabilities of Esimangaliso, and will be needed to actually engage those outside the entity, we would like, Chairperson, to be, to have a cost recovery, because we are of the view that the principle of polluter pays should also apply. But it does not necessarily mean, Chair and the honourable members, we are saying this outside what is being arranged in terms of the committee that and the team that is dealing with this particular work. So we are just raising it, Chair, because at this stage we are all of the view that we may not have 100% knowledge of when, in particular, will this particular work be finalized. Hence, the request to say it must be noted that should there be that need for additional resources, we would like a cost recovery to actually be included, especially for the work that we are doing within the estuary. In terms of the other questions, Chairperson, as to the how long will it take, I would request my colleague, Dr. Blackmore, to actually attend to that together with the one, Chairperson, that you've asked of what is it that we regard as a proper offset for the work and the damage that has happened. With your permission, Chairperson, if I may request Dr. Blackmore to then attend to those. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you so much, Acting CEO. Can you hand over to Doctor?
Thank you, Honourable Chair. The next question you raised was about the time it's going to take for recovery to kick in and the longevity of the chemicals in the system. Much of this is not known, other than we know, for instance, arsenic has a half-life of approximately 6 to 8 years. So therefore, one would say, okay, well, probably it's going to be, it's going to decay within 20 years, and therefore we would expect recovery to really settling in that sort of time frame. The other chemicals that we know that are in the system have a shorter time half-life, so we're probably looking at mostly a 20-year time frame. Bearing in mind in that system, we've got high rainfall, that recovery generally is quite quick. So, June forest will take probably about 8 years to go from degraded to climax or pre-climax state. So we're kind of in that ballpark between 10 and 20 years. The next question is about bankruptcy. Well, if they go bankrupt and there's no money, well, then unfortunately the taxpayer is going to have to cover a lot of the costs, the environmental costs. The next question you raised was about compensation. And fortunately in our law, and I think Dr. Riddle stressed it earlier, that we've got a very progressive law, and they're going to have to make good the loss. Well, part of the loss, there is a functioning ecosystem that in many respects is a key breeding ground for a lot of our fish that are fished along our coast. And having downtime on that estuary means that there's less propagules going into the marine environment, and therefore there is down the line a cost. And they're going to need, and we are looking to saying, well, that loss of functioning of the estuary needs to be compensated for in the best interests of all South Africans. How we go about that, well, there's many ways we can do it. It doesn't necessarily have to be a financial cost. It could be a physical offset in that they rehabilitate a neighboring estuary, get that a lot more functional, and in so doing offset the costs, the loss of the functioning of the estuary for the 10 to 20 years that we expect it to take place. Chair, with your, I think I've covered all your concerns and questions. If I've missed anything, just give me a shout and I'll certainly try and answer. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you so much, Dr. Lekma. Then the next response must come from the provincial department.
Thank you very much, Honorable Chairperson and honorable members. I will respond to some of the questions raised, and then ask my colleagues to come in. I think, firstly, Honorable Chair, is the issue of the lack of communication. And I think it's important also to deal with the context that when this happened, it happened during the social unrest. Of course, there were a lot of issues that we're dealing with as this department, trying just to cover all the areas which impacted on the role that we are playing. However, it is true that there's an area that we need to improve on. We concede that we need to make sure that we work on this matter, and we are trying our best now to ensure that when it comes to communication, we have a platform. In fact, as a province, we have been working on this issue. In fact, we are funding it. Of course, we did not even have even a budget for it, including establishing a website to ensure that the stakeholders are able to have access to information. I must indicate that the MEC, in addition, has appointed a panel of experts to do an investigation, including an investigation that will even cover the employees of the department. So we are also covering the costs of those panel of our lawyers that have been appointed by the MEC. When they do the work, we have to pay for it. Of course, during the fiscal consolidation, we have to move funds, although it's not easy to do that. There is a second issue of compensation. Part of the work that we do is to deal with those companies that were affected by the social unrest, and we've been working with national government on this particular matter. And what we have raised and what we think should be explored is for the stakeholders to work together and provide us with the names of those that were affected, so that we can share the information with the TIC, so that they can have access to the support programs that are issued by the national government. As a province, we do not have support programs. When national government put together this incentive, they only indicated to us that we must just identify the beneficiaries. They will then do the processing and payments. We only receive the numbers and be able to report to the executive committee on what has been done to support those that have been affected. So we want to work together with those that are affected to ensure that this does happen. On the issue of the consequence management, we are the ones who lodged the case with the police. So we to make sure that we exercise the powers that we have as a province to ensure that a case is open against UPL so that they can account. The matter on hazardous waste, I will then leave it to the national government because it is their competency to deal with that issue. I will then ask my colleagues to cover other areas that I've left. I will hand over to Mr. Ngobo. So thank you very much, honorable members.
Okay. Mr. Ngobo, you can proceed.
Thank you, HOD, and thank you, Chair. I hope I can be seen now.
No, it's just blank.
Okay,
we're
maybe
not
there's
sure
a problem.
whether we're talking to a robot or what.
Yeah, I think the camera is becoming old now. Let me continue responding. Chair, I will respond to the question that was raised by Honorable Mchunu, and also Honorable Phillips touched on that question on the issue of authorization. Let us begin by apologizing, Chair, that when we did the first presentation, there were some of the things that we had put in, including this issue of government lately has actually sort of moved towards wherein you find that you've got residential areas not far from the areas of work. That is one aspect that one wanted to actually cover. However, we want to indicate as the department that UPL, in terms of our own rating of the authorization which we issued, which we believe is quite a strong, a very good authorization that we issued, was not authorized to be where it is. And as a result, part of the issues that we are dealing with in terms of the court, the case that we've opened, deal with exactly that. One may not go into the details of that, but we are saying that we are confident that we've got a strong case, and we are confident that there was nothing untoward in terms of the authorization that we issued. It's just that it wasn't followed to the T. There is one aspect. The other issue that just responding in terms of the issue that was raised by Chair about the lessons. Of course, we do understand that that particular aspect may later come in full detail, but at this point, one of the good lessons that we've learned from dealing with this process was that previously, when we've had incidents like this, you would have each department responding on its own, and each department issuing its own directive and its own notice. However, through forming the JOC that we formed, we actually managed to cooperate very well as government departments, and as a result, the directive that was issued by the Provincial Department of Environmental Affairs included conditions that ordinarily would have been issued separately by the Department of Agriculture, Department of Labor, Department of Health, and various other departments, but we managed to work together in dealing with this. Substantively, Chair, there will be things that are still going to be unfolding in court as we've opened this court case. And therefore, at this point, some of the lessons that we would have learned may actually, if we start talking about them now, actually act to arm UPL in saying that government has actually on its own volition admitted that their systems were weak, and therefore it cannot be blamed on us. But I think we are saying for now, those are some of the lessons, and some when this whole matter has been unpacked to the end and has been finalized, we will actually articulate all the lessons that we would have learned from this. But I must indicate at this point, some of the things that going forward we'll have to look at is this mixed-use development in terms of improving the conditions, as well as ensuring that we improve in terms of enforcement. I think those are the issues that one had to respond to that related to the department. Maybe one other issue, which if the MEC was here, I'm sure he was going to touch on, is that when this matter started, he actually realized that there was a need for an independent mind or independent minds to be involved in this. And therefore, he appointed the HSG attorneys, whom he gave serious powers to say, even if there is wrong that is found on the department, they should actually report to him. So one would actually say that confidently that when this matter is finalized, should there be any wrongs on the part of the department, that would not be swept under the carpet, because there is an independent body that is actually involved on the matter. I think those are the issues that actually as a department we had to respond to. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you so much, DG, and Tim.
Thank you, Chair and members. I think on my side, I'm going to request Ms. Craig to assist, and also Mr. Walters to assist on the other questions that have been raised by the honorable members. But on my side, I just wanted to comment, Chair, in relation to the concerns that were raised by Honorable Singh and Honorable Gancho on the gaps in communication. And that is one of the areas and the lessons that we really need to improve on. We do have intergovernmental IGR structures that exist, but the lesson that we are learning is that we really need to ensure that those structures are indeed effective, where we then work together amongst the spheres of government. Obviously, in this incident, we have both local, the province entity, and also the national government. And as already highlighted by the colleagues from the province, the JOG has assisted, but it's about how then do we sustain working together effectively in these IGR structures that we currently have. I think the other point that also I want to comment on, and the chairperson of the stakeholders has indicated to yourself, Chair, that he also would want to comment on. I think in the morning when the stakeholders were presenting, and honorable members are quite correct, we don't seem to be finding each other between ourselves and the communities and affected stakeholders. And that on its own also talks to the manner in which then we engage with these stakeholders, but also providing support. And I think Mr. Reedy highlighted in the morning that there's very thick reports, not synthesized, and there isn't sufficient resources in terms of then the officials from government taking stakeholders through. And I think for me, that is an area that we really need to improve on and ensure that we provide that type of support. Whenever we engage with these stakeholders, it's something that we really need to consider. We will respond, Chair, in detail in terms of then the lessons learned as per your request, but I just wanted to flag on some of the lessons that were very glaring as we were going through this process with the province and the municipality. Can I request Ms. Craig to respond to some of the issues, especially around the hazardous waste and why it was transported from the province to another province? I think Francis can then assist in as far as that is concerned. Thanks, Chair and members.
Thank you, DG. Let me take a couple of questions, and then there'll be a couple that I'll hand over to Grant just to respond on. So in relation to the waste issues, members of the committee would know that there are very few hazardous waste landfill sites in the country. So one of the biggest ones is Holfontein, as we said, which is up in Gauteng. It has a big H license. And so, you know, when they needed to particularly take some of that solid and liquid waste off site, we needed to assess which of these hazardous waste sites that were authorized could actually take that volume of waste. So Holfontein was identified. Obviously, it's not ideal in terms of the fact that we need to put so many trucks on the road all the way to Gauteng, but we needed to look at the volumes that were currently in that site and the size of that site versus sites, for example, in KZN, like DCLM, that is also authorized, such as Shongweni, where some of the other solid waste has gone to. So we have been monitoring the waste disposal quite carefully. As I said earlier, we then also lifted the conditions to allow, for example, specifically for liquid waste to go to those sites. But it is something we're tracking through the safe disposal certificates. And we are looking towards April as a deadline in terms of lifting that. And so, as I said, we're really working with the specialists now, particularly in terms of the liquid waste, which is stormwater going into that dam that Grant spoke about, that we really need to see if we can find an alternative for that liquid waste. It's not ideal putting so much, even though it's treated liquid waste, onto a landfill site. At the moment, we cannot put it to outfall even after it's been treated, but we need to, with the specialists, look at other possibilities. And in the next month, we really will be looking at that. When it comes to Honourable Singh's comment around being a player and a referee, I think it is quite important to understand that the compliance report that we had done had a very specific terms of reference. We needed to do what we call a preliminary investigation, particularly into what permits from all of the different departments were required prior to the fire incident. And as soon as we started doing that preliminary investigation, we realized that offenses had been committed. And so it needed to move from a preliminary investigation into a proper criminal investigation. And in order to do that, the people that were involved in that could not then be involved in the criminal case in order to actually avoid that player and referee issue. And so as soon as it moved into a criminal case, there was then a completely different unit within our national department that specifically deals with criminal investigations that then took over from that. And so you'll see, as a result of that criminal investigation, because we're looking at the issue of negligence, potentially of UPL, that it will come out in that criminal case whether there is negligence on the part of any of the other departments or units within departments. I always say that when it comes to criminal investigations, there's no way to hide. And so it was important that through the Criminal Procedure Act and through evidence that we collected thereafter, we had to do it in terms of those procedures that the Criminal Procedure Act requires. In relation to the liability cover of UPL, we do understand that they do have that liability cover. It has been said to us when we've had meetings with them. In terms of the amount of that liability cover, it is not clear to us yet as authorities. We need to understand the rehabilitation costs. And then we can start engaging with them again around it. But I do need to raise a risk in relation to this issue is that, depending on how the criminal investigation goes, depending on whether the prosecuting authority then makes a decision to prosecute, and then depending on whether or not UPL is convicted in those criminal cases, that could have an impact on whether they can draw down on that insurance cover. And so those are issues that we need to be aware of as government. But we would further engage with them once the rehabilitation plan is in place to understand the costing of that and to also understand whether their liability cover actually includes that or not. Maybe just lastly from my side, before Grant, if Grant can then come in on the issue around the marine and the fishing issues, and then also just deal with the issue around erecting the UPL building again. And then also clarifying, Grant, if you can, on the issue around the 73 groupings of individuals involved in the TRR for the MSF and those forums. I think maybe just the last thing from my side in terms of lessons learned, and as the DG said, we will give more input to the committee, maybe in writing around that. But, you know, it's quite critical. We found that these smaller reaction teams of different government departments come together quicker. I think it was difficult in this case because of the fire and the unrest that was happening, but we've really learned that the quicker these multi-departmental teams come together, the quicker and the more comprehensively we can deal with these incidents. And I think we've already seen subsequent incidents, even in KZN itself, being handled in a way like that as a result of what we learned from this. As a department, we're also currently going out on tender to get a panel of laboratories in order to be able to do quick sampling, quick analysis. And obviously lessons learned from this has also helped us with that. And also, Chair, Honourable Chair and committee members, I think we've also seen the absolute dedication and commitment of government officials. I think, as you've heard before, this has been a significant incident. Nothing like this has happened before. And I think many officials have spent hours and dedicated time to really try and deal with this issue in the most professional manner. So thanks. Let me hand over to Grant just to deal with those other items. Thank you.
Thank you, Francis. Just in terms, thank you, Honourable.
Only the stuff that are not covered, ne? Only the stuff that are not covered by your colleagues.
No, good.
I know you are passionate about this matter.
I was going to say something else, but I'll comply with the instruction. Thanks, Honourable Chair. In terms of the fishing-related issues, there is quite a big community or sector of the MSF grouping that we do think has not been adequately covered. In terms of the representations, I think the Honourable Chair and members have only heard from them for the very first time today. And we do think that the multi-stakeholders forum could play quite a significant part in terms of quantifying what their losses were during this period. And as you may have heard a little bit earlier, is that the MEC has said, and apparently there's some fund that he is in charge of, that if a quantitative analysis or analysis of loss can be determined, then we could, or it could go to the province in terms of compensating for those losses. And there is a real benefit in terms of their participation in this particular committee. That was the portion that I think, Francis, you may have left out. I wouldn't like to dwell too much on the other issues, Honourable Chair. Let me leave that where it is.
Lesna, thank you for the change. You have tried to be short. Thank you for that. You are the last one on the lessons learned and the introspection and the deficiencies. Is the DG going to deal with that, or who's going to deal with that?
Let me go ahead, Honourable Chair. Okay. Yeah, Honourable Chair, thank you very much. And I must say that we found the experience in this area well said, but it exposed to us great opportunities for us to work together, not only as a principle that is on paper, but live to the instrument. Because I think there are a number of instruments that we can use to motivate us to work together. I mean, IGR is one of them. IDP is another at the local level. There's a district-based model approach. It's a one district, one plan approach. I think there's an abundance of instruments that can be used. So therefore, for us, it will be about going back and leveraging on all these initiatives to make sure that we use the experience of UPL to make sure that we do not come across a similar situation where we are found wanting, particularly when matters that come to the fore are matters of legislative nature, where enforcement is not negotiable, because enforcement of legislation cannot be negotiable. So we will therefore, Chair, move along those ways, those lines. We are convinced that where, for an example, contravention has happened, we will act. I mean, I think there's a slide in our presentation where we show that at least was a warning that was issued, and obviously that's in line with what the police or the legislation provides for, given the level of offense. And we must emphasize that the license that has been given, the license all the time, I mean, it's given in line with in terms of the Act. Now, Chair, I think just as I conclude that all gaps that have been identified will be responded to, but perhaps one thing that we may, because I think somewhere, just like Dr. Gumede has indicated, where the audio or the line wasn't very clear, Chair, I'm not sure whether it would be a helpful thing to do to then say, if there are issues that continue to be unclear from where we're sitting, if we could be furnished with those points in writing so that we comprehensively respond, without leaving anything behind. But I must say that we have mechanisms and we'll definitely reach out to each other. The issue of our relationship with the municipality anchored around the role that is played by the environmental health on the ground is the one where we remain, responsible for legislation, responsible for norms and standards, including monitoring and evaluation. But I think even if we don't go to many other sectors, at least there's one line of connection between us and the local municipality or the metropolitan municipality in terms of intervention. So, Chair, I would want to say, without repeating many things that other colleagues have spoken, that we do regret in areas where there may have been acts of omission, but we stand in to say we'll definitely walk along the path of restoring confidence that our people must have in the way the department delivers its services. Thank you very much, Chairperson, and over to you.
It's comforting what you're saying, DJ. It's really comforting. And the commitment, that's what one appreciates a great deal. Ready, we've been here since 9:30. Can you say that then we can close this meeting? I should assure you, this is not the last. The matter we're following up keen interests. The stakeholders to come and account to us. So it cannot be the last opportunity, but let me give you that opportunity, because I think you made a confirmation that you are here on behalf of the other state present earlier and for those that have left, I think you'll be able to give them feedback on how far have we gone. Over to you, Mr. Rudy.
Thank you, Honourable Chair. That has been a very long day, so I will try to be very quick. I want to respond to a few things and perhaps bust a few myths here. The suggestion that there isn't a terms of reference is simply not true. A draft terms of reference was sent out to the wider body of stakeholders for comment. Comments were received. I was part of the group that sifted through the comments, which resulted in a semi-final terms of reference, or a draft terms of reference that was then presented to stakeholders the 40 stakeholders that was referred to at a public meeting. Now, the problem that we've had is that those terms of reference, so the Stakeholders Forum was established, the terms of reference were prepared and given to the interim committee, which was appointed at that same meeting. The mandate of the interim committee was to raise any concerns and make amendments to the terms of reference if they saw fit. Now, I convened about 5 meetings to go through the terms of reference, but what we got bogged down with was pretty much the same issues that you heard from the 3 members of the community that you heard from today who serve on that committee. They are on the committee, and part of their job was to go through the terms of reference as well. But in my role as coordinator, I'm not actually the chair of that committee. They chose not to elect a chair. So I performed the function of coordinator, convener, and tried to steer the meeting as best I could. Now, the complaints that you heard today are very much the same complaints that the MEC heard at the first meeting shortly after the fire and at the various subsequent meetings. What I've had difficulty doing is getting the one group represented by the three people, because there are other members from their NGOs that are also on the committee, to get them to actually work through the document. Now, I got fairly significant input from other committee members. And as I said earlier, those terms of reference, it's a very, very good document, in my opinion. And it's one that your committee needs to read, because many of the issues that you raised today are actually anticipated and dealt with in the terms of reference. So there are terms of reference backed up by letters of appointment given to each one of the committee members. So the committee members are under no illusion as to the terms of reference that are given to them. Their right to make final adjustments to those terms of reference as they see fit, but they were also given a specific mandate as to how to deal with issues. The same complaint about not being informed and not being given information is simply untrue. For probably 6 weeks or 2 months or even longer now, these bi-weekly reports have come to me, and I've passed them directly on to the committee, and the committee in turn is supposed to disseminate it to their own groups of their own stakeholder groups, in other words, the different constituencies that they represent, and those documents are all available on the public repository. Not everybody can have access via the internet, but that information is out there. Okay, so that's not true to say there are no terms of reference and there's been no communication. Where the practical problem has come is how you get interaction between this wider body of stakeholders represented by a committee and how that feeds through to the relevant officials that have to deal with the concerns that are being raised. As I say, very few concerns have been raised based on the information given to stakeholders. The complaint has been along the lines of those same complaints that you heard today. I have nevertheless managed to marshal the committee to work through through those weekly reports, and we've extracted about 35 questions, which we've now presented to the officials that you've got here today, and they're working on giving us a response. The idea that this committee could simply join in with the Joint Operational Center, bearing in mind that's an operational grouping of government, it's not a committee, it's not a forum. But I think we've got over that now. We've got around that by what you heard today is that two representatives of this committee are going to be allowed to sit in and act as observers in the JOC, and they'll be able to have some sort of direct interaction with that committee. But how we physically and practically get stakeholders to work with government is going to have to be worked through. It's unlike any of the other forums that I think officials have had any experience of, and it's quite different to the kind of forum that stakeholders have been involved in the past. So it's a work in progress. Issues like the identification of people that are deserving of and should be looked at for compensation, that is dealt with in the terms of reference. So it's not that the issue hasn't been raised, it's in the terms of reference, and it's up to the stakeholders to get out there and find these people. But that's easier said than done. How do you get volunteers to go out into communities and, in effect, do social science research with very little expertise and very few resources? So again, it's a work in progress. We're going to have to find a way to get around that. I made a few notes here. Okay, then as far as direct interaction is concerned, the proposal to send the waste out to sea via the Southern Wastewater Treatment Works, we were invited to comment on the application that UPL made to discharge waste out to sea. We had a lengthy meeting with the eThekwini officials, and that was followed up by written submissions on the application. So there's an example where the allegation that the committee has done no work, that was a very meaningful contribution to that proposal. The same thing happened on Christmas Eve. We were given the opportunity to comment on a proposal during the heavy rain that was falling to divert some of the stormwater that should have gone into the pollution control dam, to divert that straight into the river. Again, it took a bit of time for me to rally the troops just before, so as I say, literally on Christmas Eve, but we nevertheless managed to put in written input onto that proposal. And now we sit with this, the only practical way that I've seen this committee has been able to work without being able to have face-to-face meetings or virtual meetings like this, is for the individual committee members to go through all the documents, consult their own constituencies, and then feed back into the committee, now representative of the broader grouping of stakeholders, and then for us to present, as far as possible, written submissions or questions to the officials, so that we not only do we get a written response, we're able to track all the questions that are being asked and responses. And that, I think, has got me to the end of... Yes.
I think the issue here, Mr. Jeremy.
Yes, I'm listening.
You see, our questions has been very clear, and we all listen attentively to the other parties who was raising it. The point remains, Mr. Jeremy, that the terms of reference is not final. There has to be some intervention to bring everyone on the same page. So you can't be coming here to criticize the other stakeholders in their absence, because we know you've been appointed by the MEC to lead the forum. But my questions that have raised then, maybe you're the relevant person who must respond this to us in writing. You need to clarify whether we are talking about 73 groupings or 73 individuals, and then also to clarify to us further how the draft terms of reference was circulated to these other stakeholders. Because if indeed we're speaking with one voice, we couldn't have heard what we had earlier from the other colleagues. It's a pity they are not here. And this matter, like I've indicated, is not the last time that we're interacting with you here. This is a matter of concern for all of us. Every time and again, we would like to call you because there are matters that we feel they are not adequately responded to, depending on your written submissions on the other aspects, especially on the lessons and the introspection and the deficiencies which both of you are involved are going to submit to us. We are going to get time and convene another meeting. And if it means then, because as part of our oversight, we're coming down there in KZN, we'll continue with these matters. But for now, I should think let's end.
Thank you, Honourable Chair. Can I end with that? But what I was going to is to say that I'm not being critical of the committee members themselves. What I'm saying is the expectation of a committee like this. I think there might be a greater expectation than we're able to deliver. And in that process, as the convener, I have to take responsibility. If this committee hasn't delivered, I'm the one that has to take full responsibility for that, because the mandate given to me as an independent person, I'm not a government official. And even though I might have been appointed by the MEC, I retain independence and I retain credibility with those people. So
that's where you are missing the point. That's where you are missing the point here. because that committee, when it's called, it's an interim multi-stakeholder forum. We know you are not coming from government. You have been appointed by the MEC so that then all whoever is involved in this whole value chain should be part of that stakeholder. So I think it's not about that. We have listened to the NGOs and the civil society. Already the DG from National has also made a admission to that. We need to improve on how do we do things. But I've heard your point. That's why we're saying here, we need to then another meeting focus only on the multi-stakeholder forum, Mr. Jeremy Riddle, so that we then focus on that. But like I'm saying, we cannot exhaust all the questions and temperance. You still have to finalize them as well because they are not yet finalized. So, and there has to be some more intervention to bring anybody on point. That's the fact that we are raising here. That remains the fact. I should think we need to end it here. If there's any other thing that you can raise to... No. Can we close this meeting, please? With due respect. I don't know. I think closing up this meeting now and listen to what I'm saying first, so that we can end up this meeting nicely. Members are tired. We've been counterproductive. If there's any other issue that you want to respond based on what we've raised, you can submit that in writing, and then we'll probe the matter further. This is not the first and the last engagement. I think we've spent, it's almost 12 hours seated here today dealing with this matter. And I think also for the benefit of the committee members, you will, yes, don't dialogue with me. I'm sharing the meeting so that we can come to an end, please. It's with due respect, Mr. Rede. So that's the point that I'm trying to say. Let's end it here, because if we were to open it time and again, we're still going to engage. If there are matters that you feel you need to further engage with the committee, put them down in writing. It's not the first and the last meeting we're dealing with here. So that's the issue that I'm trying. I thought the DG has covered this aspect thoroughly, but you decided to open it up again. But then let's then end this meeting here tonight, colleagues. We need to end this meeting now. I'm saying that then if Mr. Jeremy has got other issues to further raise, put them down in writing, because honestly, it's unfair to the colleagues. It's unfair to somebody who started with this meeting at 9. It's so unfair to everybody that we continue like this. Even for some other colleagues here have got meetings tomorrow, starting at 8 in the morning. They still need to rest. And then we cannot exhaust all these matters in one day. I think that's how far we have managed to deal with the matters. It's the matter that is on the agenda that we will continue to deal and get finality. Hence, you also saw, if you were here when we started in them earlier, there's a program that we're saying we're going. And also when we got all these written submissions, should we get a slot in between the oversight visits? We're still going to call everybody and then we'll continue to engage on this matter. You've seen the police report is still not yet ripe. These are the matters that we're still going to follow up. So colleagues, can we close this meeting on that note? And I want to sincerely thank you for your commitment, dedication. I know we've just become counterproductive now, but I think you have been here since morning. And from my side as the chair of the portfolio committee, I sincerely want to appreciate your commitment and thank you. And the meeting gets adjourned. We are reconvening on another agenda item on Friday. Thank you so much, colleagues. Thank you, Team Ezenpelo. Thank you, Team.
Thank you very much, Chairperson.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you, eThekwini.
Thank you, Honorable Chair. Thank you.
Good night.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Good night.
Bye. Good night.